Hi, this is Miss Litton, and this is my wonderful Period 3 AP Bio class. Say hi.
Hi.
And we're going to talk about Chapter 33, the lymphatic and immune system. And we're going to start it off by talking about how did our immune system evolve. Because in our immune system, we are trying to fight off anything that doesn't belong in us, right? So how did that evolve that we could know self from non-self? And we're going to look at a couple examples. We're going to start with the slime molds. Now, slime molds, when everything's cool, they'll be independent and just be unicellular, what you're seeing here in the bottom right-hand corner. But if times get tough, they're stronger together, and they group together as one big slimy apparatus moving through life. And they start to delegate some duties, and one of the things they do is they have sentinels. And the sentinels patrol the sliminess of their multicellularity, and they look for anything that might be trying, like bacteria, to grow on their group arrangement. So that sounds like the beginnings of an immune response, right? And this is just in a slime, what is it? A slime mold, okay? So on your notes, at the very beginning it says immune system. Could Blue tell them in that first box, what does that say? Protects what? Go. Okay, that's perfect. Go on to number 1. Immunity in cellular slime molds can live independently when food is plentiful, but B, they live as a group, a multicellular slug, when food dwindles. Some cells called sentinels circulate throughout the slug, engulfing bacteria and toxins, and then sacrifice themselves. Drosophila, what's Drosophila? Fruit fly, okay? So there are things called PAMPs and TLR, okay? So pathogen-associated molecular patterns. Let's just try to intuitively figure what that is. Pathogen-associated, so it must be on some foreign body, right? Molecular, some sort of molecule pattern. If organisms that are pathogens have PAMPs, then that would help us to tell the good guys from the bad guys. That's basically what they are. In our bodies, we call those, what do you think we call those? They start with an A. No, antibodies are what we use to fight them. What? Antigens, exactly, like antigens, okay? And then toll-like receptors. If you're a receptor, you're probably a receptor for a what? Pathogen-associated molecular pattern, right? You're a receptor for that. You're able to recognize that. In us, we're going to be talking about different types of, there's B cells and T cells, there's dendritic cells, and it's where one cell comes in contact with another cell, okay, some sort of receptor. And I guess when they were discovered, I don't know if this is 100% true, you can feel free to Google it, they're called toll-like receptors because it was like Germany or something like that, and they were screaming like, this is awesome, but in German, the word is toll. And so that's why they call them toll-like receptors. Don't ask me. Nobody will ever ask you. So TLRs in the plasma membrane of phagocytes. What are phagocytes? Phagocytosis, something eating, right? Attached to components commonly known on pathogens as their PAMPs. So you can see things about gram-negative bacteria, peptidoglycan of gram-positive, DNA and RNA of viruses. All of these things can be PAMPs. Anything associated with that pathogen is a PAMP. So here you can see pathogen, and here's a toll-like receptor for his PAMP. So here are some TLRs, toll-like receptors, and this is part of what's called innate immunity. Innate is something that doesn't have to be what? Learned. You just do it, okay? So this is what you're born with. You don't have to be exposed to anything. You are born with this type of immunity. Now, you do not need to memorize any of these. I just wanted you to appreciate all the different types of receptors that you could have. Pick one to talk about with your bio buddy. Each of you pick one. I don't care which one. Now, if there are things that trigger immune responses, are there ever things in our bodies we wish we wouldn't have? What's a terrible, terrible thing that can happen to people's bodies? Life-threatening disease you could have. Cancer, right? So if we can recognize cancer cells for what they are and start to fight them better, wouldn't that be a great thing? Anything that can trigger an immune response and turn that on against things that could harm us, that would be good. Does anybody in this room have any kind of like serious allergy, like to peanuts or anything like that? Do you know somebody who has an allergic response? Okay, now is it pretty serious? Like they could go to the hospital, right? Yeah, and I do too. Now, peanut butter in our bodies, I absolutely love peanut butter. In fact, it's one of my 5 foods, if stranded on an island, that I would want to have, okay, is peanut butter. It's a good source of protein, and it can be like a yummy dessert. Now, people, there's nothing that's going to hurt you in peanut butter unless you're what to it? And this is where your body's like, oh my gosh, it's peanut butter, and it starts to attack it. And we have our innate response that it doesn't, there's no learning. We don't get better at responding. But then we have our acquired immunity or adaptive immunity where we get better. And people who are allergic to peanut butter get better and better and better at recognizing peanut butter, and they respond faster and faster and faster with an increased response, which can be life-threatening. If any of you know somebody, I know somebody who peanut M&Ms could be in the other room in a package and they respond to it. Okay? They start to have all of those types of responses to it. Their body is like hypersensitive peanut butter, and they start to have that. Now, obviously, if they ingested it, it'd be different and more rapid. But there's times we want to turn that immune system on and times we want to turn that immune system off. Take a look at this picture, and I'd like the youngest bio buddy, just explain and see if intuitively you can figure out what's going on in this picture. Go ahead. Okay, so do you need me to make it bigger? Here, I'll make this part bigger first. Does this look like a signal transduction pathway? I think so too. Okay. So who started this pathway? The PAMP did. Okay. And then a response was had. Okay, and then keep going. You can do this too. All right, so again, you have either, it could be a toxin, it could be a chemical, it could be another organism that's triggering this response. Okay, this is how it is in reality. Simple picture, reality. Okay, so signal transduction is very complex. And so you have lots of receptors here. And this is why, remember we talked about the importance of different proteins on our cell membrane? We said some are what? Channels, carriers, receptors. Look, okay? Receptors to so many different items. So on your notes, go to immunity in Drosophila fruit fly, can recognize PAMPs, pathogen-associated molecular patterns. And I put such as dsRNA. What do you think that stands for? Double-stranded RNA. Boom shakalaka. Produced by viruses and other organic molecules found on bacteria or fungi. Receptors for PAMPs have been found in plants and humans, and may be the earliest versions or receptors to recognize pathogens. Example of innate immunity, a host defense can recognize common microbial invaders very quickly, but do not demonstrate an increased response on repeated exposure. Do not demonstrate an increased response on repeated exposure. Having an immunological memory, amping it up like I told you we do with peanut butter, okay? But not a lot of us have peanut butter issues, but you wouldn't want to get polio for the day, right? Or for the weekend. Oh, what happened to you this weekend? I had polio, okay? Let me just drag this right leg around a little bit, okay? For the rest of my life. You can't afford to have polio for the weekend and all the destruction that that would cause. That's why you go and get what? Vaccine. Where you get a weakened version of polio, but when it's still in your body, it still has an antigen that triggers an immune response. So you start to develop your armies against it. Your acquired immunity, your adaptive immunity starts to develop. That could take 10 days, it could take 2 weeks in order to build clone armies that recognize just polio. So if you're ever exposed to real polio, you have memory cells who can respond rapidly. No 2-week learning curve. They respond rapidly and then can protect your body. How many of you are vaccinated against chickenpox? So there were no vaccines when I was a little girl. What happened is your mom would be like, oh, we're going to go over to Jane's house and play this weekend. You're like, Jane wasn't in school on Friday, Mom. I think she's sick. No, that's okay. And you go over, get exposed, and so you would develop that response. And so you would get chicken pox, and you're like really, like you're pissed at your mom when she realized what she did. But then you got it over with. And it's worse to have it as an adult. Now you get vaccinated against it so that you don't ever have to deal with it. Why is it, though, that some vaccines are repeated? Why do you have to go get, if you do flu shots, why do you have to do it every year? The strand changes. Who can evolve faster, bacteria or viruses, or us? Bacteria and viruses. Yeah, they can adapt a lot faster, and when they make those flu shots, they're anticipating what they think is going to be around and putting it all in a stew pot, cooking it a little bit, taking it so it's no longer lethal, and then exposing it because their antigens are still there to trigger that immune response. Okay, good. So let's talk about the rise of adaptive immunity, having an immunological memory. An immunological memory. Description: diverse receptors on the surfaces of specialized B and T lymphocytes that bind to antigens, similar to PAMPs, and then stimulates a cascade of cells responding to that specific antigen. Increased response on second exposure. These antigen receptors are incredibly diverse due to gene rearrangement. This allows for continual evolution of responses to an ever-changing myriad of pathogens. Evolution of responses. Okay, gene rearrangement, gene rearrangement. What do you know about gene rearrangement? Where have we seen this before? What? When? When did we rearrange genes? I'm not talking about sexual recombination. Think about your control levels. Do you remember when you make your mRNA? And we talked about immature and mature mRNA, and how you put on a cap and a tail, right? 7-methylguanosine and the poly A tail. But you also would cut out the introns.
Before it leaves the nucleus.
Good. Due to which ones you cut out? Due to exon recombination. Remember introns and exons? Due to exon recombination, therefore you can get various proteins depending on what exons are next to each other. That's how we get our millions of varieties of both B and T cells in adapted response, adapted immunity. Think about it right now. I don't know what city you were born in. How many of you still live in the city you were born in? You came home in that city. Raise your hand. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 maybe people. The rest of you moved, right? And who knows where you're going to go to in your lifetime. You're going to go away to college maybe, right? You don't know where you're going to live and where you're going to travel. You are pre-adapted to everything you might be exposed to in your lifetime. You've got millions of what's called virgin B and T cells that are just waiting to be activated. Oh, hi. It just went flashy flash.
I have the LED fire.
Oh, I was like, whoa, signal. You're safe. Millions of virgin B and T cells just waiting to be stimulated so that they will make a clone army of that particular cell that can recognize that particular pathogen that you may run into in Minnesota. Okay? And at that time. Okay? So we're going to talk about that as well. That's your adaptive immunity. All right, so let's talk about the lymphatic system in general. And for that, what do I have here? Oh, look, I have some PAMPs for you. Pick one. Pick a PAMP. Pick your favorite. Pick two PAMPs. Pick two PAMPs. Did you find your favorite PAMPs? Oh, 2 scoops of PAMPs. All right. So now, this should look familiar to you. Let's talk about capillary beds. What's going on at the arterial and venular end vary? Yeah. What's strong at the arterial end of that capillary bed? What one? Hydrostatic. Hydrostatic is the outs is bigger than the ins. The ins is the osmotic pressure, right? And this forces fluids out at the arterial end. By the time you get to the venular end, the hydrostatic pressure has dropped. Osmotic pressure is about the same. And so that fluids start to get recovered. You don't recover everything you've ever pushed out. That's when the lymphatic system comes into play. It picks up that excess tissue fluid and returns it to your circulatory system about at your left subclavian vein. This is your, what bone is this? Clavicle, subclavicle vein is where it returns it, okay? And once it picks up that tissue fluid, and it's in a lymphatic vessel, it's now classified as lymph. Graduates to lymph status. Before it gets returned, very wisely, your body will pass that lymph through a lymph node. Where do you have some lymph nodes? In your throat, you can feel them. You have some in your armpit. You have some in your groin. So these are different areas where the fluid has to pass through, just like it was like a border crossing of a very big wall. And so then it will, they can process and monitor just the crossing. They don't have to monitor the whole wall. Just never mind. So it has to be able to get through there. If there's something there that sets off an alarm, it's like if somebody pulls a fire alarm here. Okay, and so all of a sudden now this will trigger a whole cascade of events. The first event that's going to happen is your innate response. Remember, how long did I tell you your adaptive immunity would take? 10 days to 2 weeks, unless it has already seen that disease before. Okay, so we're going to talk about what role it plays in that. So there are other things besides absorbing tissue. That's one of the things that happens is you absorb excess tissue fluid. And you do produce lymphocytes, but one that sometimes gets forgotten is that you absorb fat in the microvilli of your small intestines in your lacteals. So your lymphatic system also absorbs fat besides all of these immune responses that we discussed. So on your basics, collects excess tissue fluid at the capillaries. It protects the body by producing what? Lymphocytes. It collects what at the villi of the small intestine? Fat. Good. And then we talked about it's everywhere, right? These lymphatic, not everywhere, and throughout your body, and very extensive. You can see some of the different vessels that are here. And we talked about this before. If some of these get blocked, then what could you get? An edema. Remember that? Remember the gross picture I showed you with the lady? I'm assuming it's a lady just by the color of her jammies. Remember this?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, but this is also an edema. Okay, so that's the next part, problem, edema, accumulation of tissue fluid causing swelling. So you have all of these lymphatic vessels. They're in a close association with our cardiovascular system. Close association with our cardiovascular system. It goes lymphatic capillaries, venules, lymph veins with valves. Slate, explain the importance of valves and how they work. You should be talking about collapsible walls and skeletal muscles. So just like veins, okay, lymphatic vessels don't have a lot of muscle like who does? Who has muscles? Arteries, right. So they're collapsible, and when a skeletal muscle contracts, it will push against those lymph veins, and because there are valves in there, then the lymph fluid, the lymph only squirts in one direction, and that direction is back and up so it can be returned after it passes through a lymph node. So 3, movement dependent upon skeletal muscles, skeletal muscle contractions, and then I already gave you number 4. Okay, so let's look at some different organs of the lymphatic system. Now, they show you a little eviscerated girl, and the reason is one of the glands you see more prominently in children than you would in an adult, okay, and that's going to be the thymus gland. And the thymus gland is sitting right here. And I'm going to come back to the thymus gland. From your bone marrow come all of your blood cells. All of your formed elements. What are your formed elements in your blood? Red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets. Okay, red blood cell, white blood cell, and platelets all come from your bone marrow stem cells. Those red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets are sitting in what? Starts with a P. Plasma. Plasma is mostly what? Water. But dissolved in that water are? Salts. Start at the beginning. Gases, nutrients, salts, proteins, nitrogenous waste, hormones, and vitamins. Good. Okay. Why did you both say salts? Okay. Salt. Okay, yes, salt. All right. So all your blood cells are coming from your bone marrow. One of your blood cells are white blood cells. Okay? White blood cells have different categories. Some of them are lymphatic cells. The lymphatic cells are the B and the T lymphocytes. Those are the special forces. That's your adaptive or acquired immunity. Of those, B cells stay in the bone marrow until they what? Mature. Hence the name B cells. Bone marrow, right? That's why they're called B cells, because they mature in the bone marrow. Whereas T cells mature in the thymus gland. Hence the name T cells, because thymus gland starts with a T. These two are very different fighters, and I just want to preload your brain so you're thinking about this. These are your special forces. These are not just your straight up any old white blood cells. These are special forces. They fight in 2 different ways. Okay? B cells, you can have viruses in your body. They're either going to be in your own cells or in your plasma or your tissue fluid, right? Those are the only places they can be, in a cell or in the fluids of your body. That's it. What B cells will make, if triggered, they make antibodies. Antibodies can move through your plasma and your tissue fluid, and they're like Post-it notes. They will stick to that foreign object, whatever it is. Let's make the clickers in this room. We have been infected with the blue clicker virus, okay? And all of these are these foreign entities, and the antibodies will stick to them like a Post-it note and mark them for destruction. That's what B cells do. But the blue sticker virus likes to invade. And when it invades, okay, it got in, and now it's infected this cell right here. And if this is a virus, what do you know it's going to do? It's going to enter the lytic cycle and do what? Cain has become a factory for what? Viruses. Okay? So what are we going to need to do to him? We do. We need to kill him. Okay? And so, excuse me, you're not dead yet. Okay, so when he displays, he can't help. Our body cells can't help. We're like, this is what's in me. Okay? We can't help but display it. So when he displays this, some fighting cell, a T cell, comes along, dock with him. And when he docks with him, he goes, oh my gosh, you are harboring terrorists. I must kill you. Okay? So then he will wipe him out. Okay? And so T cells can only talk by what's displayed to it. That's going to become important in just a little bit. Okay, perfect. All right. So these guys are going to release antibodies. Free floaters, they take care of. T cells do cell-to-cell combat on our own body cells that are infected or maybe a cancer cell. Now, where can we meet each other? Where can you meet the pathogen? In a place like a lymph node, right? That's where the B and T cells can come in contact with the pathogen. Because instead of having to monitor your whole leg, all it has to do is monitor your lymph nodes at the top of your leg. Because if there is something in your leg, it's going to have to pass through that lymph node. So they just hang out there. Now, what if it's not in your tissue fluid? What if this pathogen is moving through your blood? The spleen will handle the blood. B and T cells can hang out in the spleen and monitor your blood. Lymph nodes take care of the tissue fluid. So let's go up close. Here is a lymph node. And youngest bio buddy wants to tell what they know about lymph nodes, and then I'll fill in the notes for you. Go ahead. Okay, so let's add to our notes. Organs. The primary ones, the red bone marrow, all blood cells originate from this tissue, including the B and T lymphocytes, and the B cells mature here in the bone marrow. The thymus gland, T cells mature here. So your primary is red bone marrow and your thymus gland. Your secondary, I'm going to come back to spleen. We're at lymph node. It filters tissue fluid. Filters tissue fluid. Okay, here is a spleen. I actually got this picture from a cooking website. Okay, because some people eat spleen. Okay, no, not human spleen. We're not vampires. Oh my gosh. Prince of Darkness over there. Okay, so anyway, the human spleen. Yes, they get them on the black market. Okay, no, it's like a cow spleen. So the spleen filters blood. Filters blood. Okay, then you have some other little localized areas of lymphatic tissues like your tonsils. You even have places along your intestines that harbor lymphatic tissue, in your appendix, lymphatic tissue. Why do you think that's adaptive to monitor your alimentary canal, your digestive tube? Yes? Yeah. It's the food you eat. You're exposing your body. That's a gateway into your body, right? And that's where we're going to be going next. Is we have all these adaptations to protect our bodies from things getting in. Okay? And so this would contribute to that, because this is like our last ditch effort right here, you know? But if they cross our barriers, then we have that's when our inflammatory response starts. That's when the police get called and the firemen, and then eventually the special forces. Okay, so patches of lymphoid tissue, and I gave you those already. Okay, not it. 2 quiz questions. Pass or play? Go. 2 quiz questions.
What is the what is the
I can throw them clean, they stick in the chest. They outspin them through this. I have a video. Want to see a video? I'll show you a video. I can spin them.
Sorry, I'm communicating with Mr. Buchanan real quick.
Is that cleanness? I'm gonna give you. What are T cells?
what do T cells do?
All right, you asked good questions. All right, here we go. So let's talk about non-specific defenses. Okay, non-specific defenses. You want things to just stay out of your body. Once they get in our body, we actually have to what them? Fight them. So we'd rather they just stayed out. So let's look at some of the adaptations we have. One of those things is skin. If you think about oil glands that we have on our skin, that oil can protect us from bacteria living there, but also it keeps our skin very what? To have oil on it. Do you know? Yes, it doesn't dry out. What happens if our skin dries out? It will what? Crack. Right? So you need your skin. I mean, think about it. It moves with your body, right? It's not like we move it and it cracks. Have you ever had a sunburn? A bad one? And it's like you can't, right? Does your skin have that same flexibility? You've kind of damaged it, right? And so having healthy skin with oil on it, that's a good thing. Okay? Keeps our skin flexible. And we have hairs. Like here, looks like there's something in there. Okay, but hairs like in our nostrils, like in our ears that protect your saliva and your tears. Think about it. In your mouth and in your eyes, you have antimicrobial agents to try to kill off any bacteria that might try to get into our body through those types of openings. In our stomach, we have a very low what? pH to try to help things stay out of our body. So on your notes, barriers to entry, I gave you all of those, but number 2, the word you're looking for in 2 is growth, and the word you're looking for in number 4 is low. Slate, tell Blue without looking at your notes. Name 3 or 4 different ways that we keep foreign entities from getting in our body. Don't look at your notes, just tell them from what we talked about. All right. Now, if they do get in, if they cross, okay, into our bodies, how do you know who the invaders are? What did we see before when we looked at the evolution of the immunological response? We have receptors for what? PAMs. And anything that triggers a response is called an antigen. So these are surface markers. It could be on a bacteria, it could be on a virus. It's on all your cells as well. Okay? If you wanted to give somebody a kidney because their kidneys are failing, you have antigens on your kidney. So when you give that, Ori wants to give his kidney to Max because Max has lost kidney function. So Ori says, go ahead, take one of my kidneys, buddy. But the problem is once that goes in his body, Max's body is going to go, you are not Max. You are a foreigner. I must kill you. Okay? And we will attack that tissue. So anything that triggers an immune response, is called an antigen. If our own body cells trigger an immune response, that happens as well. If you've heard of lupus, right? That's an autoimmune autoimmune disease. That's when you forget self and non-self, when you can't tell apart anymore, and use rheumatoid arthritis. You attack your own joints in your fingers, in your arms, in your neck. Your immune system cells are sitting there and fighting. I have a girlfriend who had breast cancer twice. She's had everything removed, and now she has rheumatoid arthritis. Who knows? It could be connected to treatments. There could be all sorts of issues. So now she has to take drugs and sit in 5 hours to get drugs to prevent her own body cells from fighting infections because they're fighting and attacking her own body. So what does that open her up to? Infections, right? Because she's suppressing her own immune system because her own immune system has gone rogue and has started to attack our own tissues. So I want you to appreciate the beauty that your body can tell self from what? Non-self. Okay, that's a huge deal. How do we do that? By recognizing these antigens. And these antigens belong to us or they don't belong to us. If they don't belong to us, who do we call? The North Koreans. Okay? I'm just kidding. I'm trying to be timely. South Koreans. Call us South Koreans. Okay? So we need to call the good guys to the rescue. Now, when we think of the good guys, right, even in our own world, we think about who are the good guys that protect us? Policemen. Who else? Firemen, people in the military, right, all protecting us. So when we look at all the protectors, right here, we have more police here in the United States than we have special forces. Would you agree with that? Okay. Who's going to be better to target a terrorist? Special forces. Okay. So when you look here, let's say we have an invasion of Canadian terrorists into this school. Okay.
Take out Green's house.
If we had Canadian terrorists dressed like students, looking like students in your classes, would you be able to tell? Yeah. Yeah. How do we know self from non-self? How do we know that they're okay? How do you know what adults can be on this campus? Right. We're all supposed to carry with us at all times a badge that says, I belong on this campus. And if you don't have a badge, they should have a what on? Sticker. Yeah, you're supposed to have a sticker. You go in the office. There are many, many times I see adults with no stickers and no badges. Okay? And I don't know where they're from. So I'm always telling them, hey, did you check into the office? And I'll be like, you got to check into the office, right? That's a protective measure because if you don't have the right identifier, then you could be somebody that's bad, right? So these are the people that get called. This is your innate, built into your body. You don't have any learning that's involved. Now, all of these could be classified as white blood cells. These, in particular, are lymphocytes, okay? Now, when we look at these, do you see how some look like they have little granules in them? You see little dots? Those are collectively known as granulocytes. They have those little granules in them. And let's talk about some of them. Now, the most common one of all, straight up standard policeman, is a neutrophil. Usually first on the scene, they're most numerous. And they will, all of these guys, not all of them, a lot of these guys eat things. If they're bad, if they're not self, they will eat it and destroy it, okay? Now, if you look here, eosinophils, these guys, they will take care of really large things like a worm. They're not afraid of this ginormous worm. They will all attack it and try to destroy it if you get a worm in your body. Basophils and mast cells have something in common. Mast cells secrete histamine. Do you know what histamine does in your body? Makes your blood vessels leaky. You know why it makes them leaky? So it makes it easier for fighters who are traveling through your capillary bed to get out through the spaces of your endothelium. Okay? So mast cells do that out in, they're located out in your tissue fluid. Basophils are in your blood. Where are macrophages? Right here. Macrophages start off as monocytes, which are smaller, and then they leave and they get bigger out when they're fighting. They just get bigger and bigger and start engulfing. Any of these white blood cells, just like the sentinels I told you about with the slime mold, they will eat and eat and eat until they what? Die. And then they're called pus. Pus is a sign of infection because the only reason you would have dead white blood cells is because they were doing what? Fighting something. Okay? So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Dendritic cells, they're like, usually in these kind of wars of the immune system, there's garbage. They're constantly cleaning up the garbage, the detritus of this mess of this battle. Natural killer cells, which you'll know why I say it like that in a minute. Natural killer cells, these are guys that wanted to go to Navy SEAL school and dropped out. Okay? And so they're kind of posers. What are you doing? What are your pictures of? I'm really worried about your group shared notes right now.
No, you just said Max.
What?
So you just said Max.
Oh. Okay, anyway, these natural killer cells, what they'll do is they just come upon anything that's foreign and they just try to wipe it out the best that they can. And we'll talk about that. Complement, they drill holes. This is not drawn to scale. This should be like very, very not even visible to the eye compared to these cells. We'll talk about that. Now over here then again are your special forces. This is your adaptive immunity, but once you've been exposed to a disease, it won't take 10 days to 2 weeks. You can respond very rapidly to it. So when these start, the police get on the scene, you start to get what's called an inflammatory response. An inflammatory response, it's tender, it's red, it's swollen, it's painful when you have an inflammatory response. It could be localized. If they talk about something being systemic, your infection is everywhere in your body. But this guy, I kind of made this collage of infections for you. Keep in mind, my eyes are destroyed from all the infections I saw in different places. But this guy right here, I remember him. He was a hiker and he was going underneath a bridge, like in rocks and water, like a running water, and he was that was the way to cross. It was under this bridge, and he fell backwards onto glass, and it just sliced open his hand like that. I remember that. Okay, so here you could get a spider bite or something, and it bites you, and it puts their toxins in your body. That would be considered an antigen, something that triggers an immune response. You've all felt that when you get a mosquito bite. I don't know what you guys are like. I am when I get a mosquito bite. It's like ginormous, swollen out to China, and I'm just like, and it's huge, and it itches. It's just terrible. Some of you, you're not, does anybody in here not bothered by mosquitoes? Do you think you're adapted to it? I want to know, because they love me.
He's born here, so he just like gets attacked, like he gets all this little bit.
You don't.
I wasn't born there, but
That is something I would like to know. Okay, yes.
All you have to do is if you're around mosquitoes, just like clench your muscles, and then if they come, they just pop off because.
I have been in Minnesota in the summer, which is so beautiful. You can't even go out there at night because the mosquitoes come and like literally pick you up. I have been stung through jeans, stung in my scalp. Yeah, it's hideous. I mean, it is. Yeah, it's terrible. But anyway, so your body is responding to that pathogen. Now, let's look at who the players are, and then we'll break down the response. The granulocytes, I told you about them. Okay. So, a couple things about these guys. They attack invaders in large numbers. They are not specific. They're just call the police and they show up. They eat until they what? Die. And then I talked to you about pus already. A small part of the granulocytes are specialized in attacking larger parasites like a worm. Those are like the eosinophils. They'll go for the big guys. So that's one of the players. Okay? Macrophages. These are slower to the scene, but they are big time eaters. They live longer, they get larger, they have greater capacities. They're not there immediately, but they kind of roll up a little bit after. Okay? They also are key in waking up the rest of your immune system and sending out alarms. Okay? They start out, like I mentioned, as monocytes, and they're smaller, but that allows them to get out of the capillaries, and once they get out in the tissue fluid, then they can get bigger. Okay, so once they leave the bloodstream, they'll turn into macrophages. and then you got all this battle going on, your dendritic cells. They're going to come along. They are also eater cells. And they can help with the activation of the immune system as well as the macrophages. And they can clear them of any foreign particles. They're kind of cleaning up the scene. Got it? All right, so let's look at now putting it all together and how you have an inflammatory response. So here, let's say you've fallen and you skin your knee, okay? And in the process, you get all of these bacteria that are starting to get into that wound on your knee. We've got blood platelets coming. What are they doing? Yeah, they're trying to get the blood to clot right there so you don't bleed out, okay? Now, these mast cells will be triggered to release histamine. Now, I've talked about it already, so whose turn is it, blue or slate? Go blue. Talk about what histamine does, blue. Own it. This is a key chapter. Own this.
Is that Kane's joke?
Okay, so the histamine, remember these are endothelium. Remember our capillary is one cell thick, right? So it creates spaces. So now you can see that monocyte can squeeze out and then he can become a macrophage. But keep in mind, now that you've created those spaces, what pressure is greatest at the arterial end of your capillary bed? What is it? Hydrostatic pressure, right? So what else is going to get forced out? If you weren't so concerned with your meme, you'd be more focused on this. So what else is going to get forced out? Keep in mind, I'm enacting Go Guardian so I can see everywhere you go on these computers. Okay. So when the fluid comes out, okay, it can cause that area to do what? Swell. Now, when you have excess tissue fluid out here, or outside of your blood supply into an area where it's just pooling, that can push on free nerve endings, which causes what? Pain. Yeah. If you've ever had any kind of injury, swollen, or even when we get acne on our faces, that can be very painful right where that is because of that swelling and pushing on your free nerve endings. And also you have this extra fluid. Our blood is warm, right? The plasma is warm. So it causes that area to be heated up, which can be a good thing because what could that cause? High temperatures could possibly kill off the bacteria, right? So you can have localized fevers just in that area where it feels warm to the touch when you have an infection. Okay, so now neutrophils are on this. Here's a neutrophil that came out. He's eating. He's usually first on the scene. Then the monocytes come out and become macrophages. And these macrophages are releasing chemical signals that other cells can receive to amp up the immune response. All right? Slate, it's all yours. Talk about it. Go. Own it.
Bacteria and other pathogens enter the body. And then platelets from blood release blood products that take that release. And then cells that mediate vasodilation and vascular constriction, delivery for blood plasma and cells to injured area increases. I need good tissue.
All right. So on your notes, inflammatory response, it's the result of damaged tissues due to injury or invaders. Due to injury or invaders. We went over the possible fighters, the playas, already. Neutrophils are most numerous, first on the scene, big time eaters. Monocytes, which migrate to the infection scene and then become what? What do the monocytes become? Macrophages, good. Bigger eaters, alarms and scavengers. Dendritic cells or eaters, they will display the foreign antigen and work with T cells. Okay, now I want to take a short break on this part and respond to, remember when I had Kang do, maybe your last name forever, sorry. He went, no, oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm going to need you in a minute. He is displaying on what's called an MHC1. When he displays on an MHC1, this means this thing has overtaken him, and then we're probably going to have a cell that comes along and kill him. Now, I might be a dendritic cell, and I have eaten this thing, ripped it apart, and I own it. And I'm trying to find that B or T cell that can recognize this particular pathogen. When I display it, I'm sure it doesn't recognize it. She does, okay? I have found the virgin, okay? And, okay? Now what's going to happen is I am now going to make clones, so we have more cells that recognize the blue clicker virus. Do you see that? When I display, I'm not displaying like him. I'm not displaying on an MHC1. I'm displaying on an MHC2. Okay? I own you. Okay? I am displaying and trying to elicit response. When he's displaying, he's like, yeah, I know. I mean, you're going to kill me any second now. I know it. He displays on an MHC1. T cells, that part of our immunity, can only talk to other cells. Okay, if he is a T cell, he can only talk to us and know anything by how we display. There's no other way to engage a T cell. It's the only way to communicate. There we go, now kill him. Okay. All right, so when you look right here where it says, look at natural killer cells. No, that's not what I want. No, go to dendritic cell. Do you see where it says eaters display foreign antigen, work with T cells? Do you see that? Put in parentheses or just put APC. APC. It stands for antigen presenting cell. In our little drama, I was an antigen presenting cell. So dendritic cells, they're cleaning everything up, and then they're running around going, who can recognize this particular pathogen? Because I need to find the B and T cells that can to trigger our immune response. APC, antigen presenting cells. Okay, and the natural killer cells recognize and remove diseased cells containing viruses or cancer cells. Where are you at? What number?
33.3 and 5 and 6.
Oh, sorry about that. Lysozyme is an antimicrobial enzyme, breaks down bacterial cell walls found in saliva, mucus secretions in tears. And 6, harmless bacteria living in intestines and vagina prevent pathogens from colonizing. I had skipped over 5 and 6 in the box above. All right. So, what are some symptoms of when this is going down? You get swelling. Mast cells release histamines, which causes vasodilation. Redness, higher temp due to enlarged capillaries. And pain due to swollen areas triggering free nerve endings. And then the results, you can get a fever, like a localized fever, which inhibits growth of microorganisms. Pus, which are dead phagocytic white blood cells. And leaky, dilated capillaries, which allow fighting cells, dendrites, or dendritic cells. Dendrites are the part of a neuron that receives signals. Neutrophils and other white blood cells to more easily access the injury site. More easily access the injury site. Yes?
So, is it not dendrites?
No, put dendritic cells. So I want you to see right here, these macrophages, do you see how they're releasing these cytokines? cytokines are ways for one cell to talk to another chemically, and let's see what some of them do, okay? So we're going to talk about the complement system, and that encapsulates many different items. But one of the things it does is it triggers our inflammatory response, and you can release things called interleukins. And interleukins are like the Red Bull for your immune system. When interleukins are out there, they're like, yeah, let's keep fighting. It pumps them up. And we're going to revisit that concept at the end, but I wanted to share that one with you. Another one is interferon. Now, interferon is actually secreted by a cell that's already been infected. So somebody already infected with the blue clicker virus will release the interferon, and it's a warning to all the non-infected cells as a precautionary measure to tell you there's viruses out here, lock your doors and windows so that you don't get infected. That's what interferon is. And Slate wants to explain that using this picture right here. Could you see how this could be used medically? Right? If some virus is taking over in your body, if you get a shot of interferon so that it gets your other cells, protects them. It can't do anything about, bless you, the cells that are already infected, but it can help against the other ones. So anyway, that's some of the message that can be sent out. The complement system includes a series of proteins, and it is a very, very complicated process by which these proteins come together as a unit in order to drill holes into a bacterial cell. When these holes are drilled, the inside of the cell is hypertonic, the outside is what? Hypotonic, and what happens is the fluid rushes in and causes them to lose it, explode. So I want to show you a video on that, and while I do, I need to pause this. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to have an ed puzzle to see if you know which C3, C4 convertase is there. What I want you to see is this is a very complicated process before you go drilling holes in bacteria, right? And you know what you want? It's like a cascade event. This triggers this, triggers this, triggers this. That's what I want you to see there. Now, another cell are the natural killer cells. And the natural killer cells roll up on a foreign entity and basically kill it. I'm going to show you something about that as well, but let's get the notes down first. Underneath, protective proteins. Complement proteins are produced mainly by the liver and complement certain immune... liver. We brought up the liver again, right? Where else did we talk about the liver? What? I still can't hear you. Circulatory system. What does it do?
Oh, it's not spotted liver.
Remember the hepatic portal vein? When nutrient... Oh, wait, I haven't taught you hepatic portal vein yet, have I?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I did. Right, so when nutrients are in the circulatory... I was thinking because we hadn't done digestion yet. But when you absorb those nutrients, it goes to the liver, right? We talked about destroying all red blood cells. We're going to learn about how it makes bile, and here it is involved in the immune system. All of these organs working to maintain... Exactly. Always in blood, but need to be activated by pathogens. Remember what started that whole long video were the antigens, the little red bumps on the bacterial wall. Okay? It helps destroy pathogens in 3 ways. Enhanced inflammation, triggering histamine release or attracting phagocytes. Increased phagocytosis. And we saw that, remember, in the different complexes, how it could increase phagocytosis. And C, membrane attack complexes. Produce holes in the surface of some bacteria, so it will burst. Cytokines are soluble proteins that affect the behavior of other cells. These are those signals we looked at, like interleukin, where it amps up the immune response, or interferon when you're infected and you're warning other cells. Oh, which is the next thing. Interferon's a type of cytokine that is produced by a virus-infected cell that causes neighboring cells to produce substances that slow their cellular metabolism. Okay, these were mentioned earlier in the inflammatory reaction of the natural killer cells, and I just want you to see how they are at work. And this is the portion of the lecture. I'm going to stop right here. This was all of innate immunity. I'll have a different video for your adaptive immunity. Hope you learned something. Have a piece of toast.